It was 5:40 in the morning when I started my shift, and Dubai was still half asleep. I always take the same route first, down Sheikh Zayed Road, past the Burj Khalifa, while the sky is still a kind of soft gray blue before the heat and the traffic and the noise take over the city. Most mornings, my first pickup is a hotel worker or a cleaner heading to a shift. Nothing unusual. Nothing I remember by the afternoon. That morning was different. The pickup request came from a hotel near the Burj Khalifa, one of those tall glass towers where the doormen wear white gloves and nobody who's actually rich ever looks you in the eye. I pulled up at 5:52, and a man walked out alone, no luggage, just a small black backpack, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my car. He got in the back seat and said quietly, "Just drive. Anywhere. I'll tell you where." I want you to remember that line because by the end of this ride, I understood exactly why he said it that way. I didn't ask questions. In this job, you learn fast. Some passengers want conversation, some want silence, and some, you can tell within the first 10 seconds, are somewhere in between, like they're deciding whether to trust you with something. He was American. I could hear it in the way he said, "Thank you." The accent, the way he checked his phone every few seconds and then put it face down on his knee like he didn't want to look at it anymore. For the first 5 minutes, nothing. Just the hum of the engine, the city lights sliding past the window, the call to prayer starting faintly from a mosque somewhere behind us. Then he asked me something I didn't expect. "Do you ever feel like you left the wrong life behind?" I laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. I told him I came here for work, for a better income, to send money home. Simple. Practical. He nodded slowly, like that wasn't quite the answer he was looking for, but it was close enough to open the door. And then he started talking. And once he started, it was like something had been sitting behind a locked door in him for a very long time. And my taxi, at 6 in the morning, going nowhere in particular, was somehow the first place it felt safe enough to come out. He told me he used to live in a small town in Ohio, not somewhere anyone would recognize the name of. He said his father ran a hardware store there for 30 years, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where you could put things on a tab and pay next month. He said he used to think that life was small. Boring. He said he used to sit behind the counter as a teenager and dream about somewhere bigger. A city with lights, with movement, with people who didn't know his whole life story before he even opened his mouth. He got that. Eventually. He moved to Chicago for college, then to New York for work, then somewhere else, and somewhere else again, chasing something he could never quite name. Here's where his voice changed. He stopped looking at his phone entirely. He told me that 3 years ago, he started a company, some kind of investment consulting business. Oh, he didn't go into the technical details, and honestly, I didn't understand half of what he did say. But I understood the important part. It grew fast. Faster than he expected. Money came in from people who trusted him with their savings, their retirements, their children's college funds. And for a while, he said, it worked. Really worked. He said there's a specific feeling when you're right about something financial, and everyone around you is watching you be right. He said it feels like being invincible. Then he stopped talking for almost 30 seconds. I actually looked at him in the mirror because I thought maybe he'd fallen asleep, or maybe he regretted saying anything at all. He hadn't fallen asleep. He was deciding whether to keep going. 18 months ago, he said, I made a mistake, and instead of telling anyone, I tried to fix it quietly. I want you to sit with that sentence the way I had to sit with it in that driver's seat, because what came next is the reason I'm telling you this story at all. Oh, he said the mistake wasn't really one decision. It was a series of small ones, each one feeling reasonable at the time. A bad investment he covered with client funds thinking he'd replace it before anyone noticed. Then another gap he covered the same way. Then another. He used the phrase, robbing tomorrow to pay for today, and said it so flatly, like he'd rehearsed saying it out loud, maybe to a mirror, maybe to no one, for a very long time. By the time he realized how deep it had gotten, he said, it wasn't a mistake anymore. It had a different name. And that name comes with people in suits who ask you very specific questions, and eventually, with rooms you don't get to leave. I asked him, carefully, because at this point I genuinely didn't know what kind of ride I was in, whether anyone knew, whether this was something that had already happened or something that was still happening. He looked out the window at the skyline for a long moment before he answered. He told me an internal audit had started 2 weeks ago. Quiet at first. The kind of thing that starts with an email asking for clarification on a few transactions and turns, within days, into lawyers being present in every meeting. He said he'd watched, in real time, as the people around him started speaking to him differently. More careful, more formal, the way people talk to someone they're not sure they can trust anymore. He said he flew to Dubai 4 days ago, told his wife it was a work trip, told his business partners it was to meet an investor. He said the truth was simpler and worse. He needed 1 week where nobody could reach him and ask him a question he didn't have a good answer for. I remember the traffic light we were sitting at when he said the next part. Red light, palm trees on the median, a delivery bike weaving past us. He said he had 2 choices sitting in front of him that morning. Fly back to America and face what was waiting. The investigators, his family, the people whose money he'd lost, the specific look his father would give him if he were still alive to see it. Or don't go back at all. He said he'd been circling that decision in his head for 4 days, walking the marina at night, sitting in hotel lobbies, not ordering anything, and this morning, this exact ride, was supposed to be him going to the airport to book a one-way ticket somewhere with no extradition and no forwarding address. The light turned green. I didn't move the car for a second, neither did he seem to notice. I asked him quietly why he was telling all of this to a taxi driver he'd never met and would probably never see again. And this is the part that stayed with me the whole rest of my shift, the whole rest of the day, honestly, the whole rest of the week. He said, because you don't know my name. You don't know my father's name, or my wife's name, or the name of a single person whose money I lost. For the first time in 18 months, I get to say all of it out loud to someone who can't do anything with it. No lawyer, no wife, no detective, just a driver and a road, and 20 more minutes before I have to decide who I'm going to be. I didn't say anything smart back to that. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a priest. I'm a taxi driver who works the early shift so I can pick up my daughter from school in the afternoon. I just said, 20 minutes is enough time to change your mind twice. He laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time the whole ride. I ended up driving him not to the airport, but back toward the marina. At his request, no real explanation given. When he got out, he paid in cash, more than double the fare, and he stood on the sidewalk for a second like he wanted to say something else. He just said, "Thank you for the 20 minutes," and walked toward the water. I don't know what he decided. I don't know if he flew home and turned himself in, or disappeared somewhere I'll never hear about, or is still walking that marina right now, still deciding. What I do know is this. Every single morning, I pick people up who are mid-story, in the middle of decisions I'll never see the end of. Most of them, I never think about again after I drop them off. Him, I think about every time I drive past that same hotel near the Burj Khalifa in the early morning, before the city wakes up. When the sky is still that same soft gray blue, it was the day he got into my back seat and told a stranger the one thing he'd never told anyone else.